My parents abandoned me in an orphanage when my brother was born, but now they want me to pay for his college due to their bankruptcy. I am Liam. I am 27 years old, and my story begins long before I could remember what family meant. I grew up feeling like a stranger in my own home, although I did not even fully understand why. My parents, Michael and Claire, had me when they were relatively young, at a time when they were still learning to manage adult life. We were not rich, but we did not live in misery either. My parents had stable jobs. My father was a bus driver, and my mother worked at the reception desk of a small medical office. I always thought we were a normal family, until my younger brother, Lucas, arrived. As far back as I can remember, I was always the awkward child in the family. There were no pictures of me on the walls of our home. My clothes were always secondhand. My toys were the ones my cousins no longer wanted, and the few times my parents took me somewhere, it seemed more out of obligation than desire. I never understood the indifference until I was old enough to put the pieces of the puzzle together. When I was 6 years old, my mother became pregnant with my brother. It was a planned and celebrated pregnancy, the opposite of my existence. While my mother was excited about the arrival of the new baby, I was relegated to a corner, like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit into the decoration of the house. Family visits came with gifts and smiles for the future baby, while I went unnoticed. The comments started to bother me. Now the family will be complete. A wanted child. What a blessing. A wanted child, and what was I? The day my brother was born, I knew. I saw the way my parents looked at him, with a love and devotion they had never shown me. For the first time, I understood that I was nothing more than a mistake, an accident they had learned to tolerate, until their true happiness arrived. I tried to get close to Lucas, to be part of the family excitement, but my mother always pushed me away. Do not touch him so much, Liam. You could make him sick. Do not make noise when he is sleeping. We do not want him to wake up. Go play somewhere else. You are bothering us. My world became a place where I was always superfluous. My father, although less cruel in words, did nothing to change it. He just looked at me with pity, or ignored me when it was not convenient for him. And so the months went by, increasingly invisible in my own home. But the situation did not end there. When I was 7 years old, one winter afternoon, my mother took me for a car ride. There was nothing unusual, except that I did not take any of my things with me. The conversation was brief, almost rehearsed. Liam, we are going to a place where you will be better off. At first, I thought she would take me to my grandparents or some other relative, but I did not recognize the route. The city was left behind, and after a long trip, we arrived at an old building with a large iron gate at the entrance. There was a sign that read, San Vicente Children's Home. There I understood everything. My mother got out of the car, and I followed her, fearfully. Inside the building, a woman with gray hair and a stern expression greeted us. My mother spoke to her for a few minutes, and then, without looking me in the eye, she bent down to tell me, You will be fine here, Liam. No hugs, no goodbyes, no tears. She stood up and left without looking back. I stood there, paralyzed, watching as the car disappeared down the road. One of the center's assistants took my hand and led me inside. I did not understand why they had left me there. Not until, weeks later, I overheard one of the workers say, It seems they brought him because they could not support both children. I was replaced. My existence became dispensable as soon as my brother was born. The first nights in the orphanage were difficult. I cried silently, wondering what I had done wrong to deserve this. I watched the other children, many of them orphans, others abandoned like me. We all carried the weight of being unwanted, but no one could explain to us why. The orphanage was not a horrible place, but it was not a home either. The caregivers did their best to take care of us, but there was not enough love to go around among so many children with invisible scars. They gave us food, shelter, and education, but not affection. I learned quickly that the only person I could trust was myself. As the years went by, I became convinced that they would never come back for me. At first, every time the phone rang or a visitor arrived, my heart would race with the hope that my parents had changed their minds. But they never came. They never wrote to me. They never asked about me. My family had moved on without me, as if I had never existed. It was not until I turned 18 that I finally left the foster care system. I had nowhere to go, but I had something they had taught me over the years, to survive. I got a small job at a fast food restaurant. where I learned the value of money and how hard it was to earn it. For years, I worked day and night, saving every penny so I could build my own future. I promised myself that I would never depend on anyone again, until one day, I received an unexpected call. An unknown number appeared on my phone screen. I answered without thinking much, and on the other end of the line, I heard a voice I had not heard in 20 years. "Liam, it is Mom." My mother's voice sounded exactly as I remembered it, cold, emotionless, as if she was calling me to ask for a trivial favor instead of contacting me for the first time in 20 years. For a moment, I could not answer. My mind was stunned by the number of thoughts exploding inside my head. Why was she calling me now? How had she gotten my number? What did she expect me to say? "Liam, are you there?" she asked in a tone that tried to sound motherly, but that could not disguise her discomfort. My first instinct was to hang up, to close the door on her the same way she had done with me 2 decades ago. But instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak. "Why are you calling me?" There was an awkward silence on the line before she answered. "We need to talk, Liam. It is important." Her voice hesitated, as if she was carefully measuring her words. "We need to." I did not want to talk to her. I did not miss her. I did not feel for her, for what she did. Just a cold "we need to." My heart hardened. I knew this call was not a sudden outburst of maternal love. Not after 20 years of absolute silence. "I do not see what could be important between us," I replied coldly. "You left me in an orphanage when I was 7 years old. 20 years later, you call me as if nothing happened. Why, Liam?" Her voice trembled. "I know many years have passed, but do not think I never thought of you." I laughed bitterly. "You did not think of me enough to come looking for me." She sighed as if my answer was exhausting her. "Please, son, can we talk in person?" "Son," as if she had the right to call me that. "I am busy. I do not have time to play happy family." "It is about your brother," she said hastily before I could hang up. That name made me stop. "Lucas." Gritting my teeth, I remained silent. "Lucas is in trouble, Liam, and we need your help." "My help?" I repeated, feeling a surge of disbelief. "How exactly do you think I can help you after everything you did?" "We can talk in person," she insisted. "We will explain everything." There was something in her tone that made me realize how desperate she was. I still did not understand what they wanted from me, but my instinct told me it was nothing good. And what if I say no? Another awkward silence fell. My mother hesitated for a moment before answering. "Please, Liam. We are not asking for much, just a meeting." She was not being serious. If they were contacting me after 20 years, it was because they wanted something big. And for some reason I did not understand, I agreed. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe because, after all the hate I had carried for years, I wanted to see with my own eyes what they had become. I wanted to see if they had any humanity left, or if they were still the same people who had discarded me as if I was worthless. "Tomorrow, just one meeting." She let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Liam. I will send you the address." I did not say anything else. I hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling a mixture of anger, anxiety, and a hint of something I did not want to admit. Expectation. Not because I expected my parents to have changed, but because, for the first time in 20 years, they were the ones who needed me. The next day, I arrived early at the cafe where we agreed to meet. It was a small establishment in downtown Austin, Texas, a sufficiently neutral place to hide the surreality of the situation. I ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and waited, absently watching the traffic while my mind went over every detail of my forgotten childhood. 20 minutes passed before the cafe door opened and my parents walked in. My heart pounded, mixing contained rage with disconcerting nervousness. I watched them as they approached. My father, Michael, looked aged, with premature gray hair and the stooped posture of someone carrying worries on their shoulders. My mother, Claire, looked pale, nervous, very different from the cold and insensitive woman who abandoned me years ago. When they saw me, they hesitated for a second before approaching the table. Without giving them time to take control of the situation, I pointed to the chairs opposite me and said firmly, "Sit down." My voice came out harsher than I had planned, but I needed to make it clear that I was not there to make peace easily. They both obeyed silently. My mother tried to smile shyly, but I did not respond to the gesture. "Thank you for coming, Liam," my father began uncertainly. "I know this must be very difficult for you." His false empathy irritated me immediately. You have no idea, I replied curtly. But I am here now. What do you want? My mother intervened quickly, in a tone that was intended to be conciliatory. Liam, first we want to tell you that we are sorry for what happened. I could not help but let out a short, sarcastic laugh, which made them both lower their eyes. You are sorry for what exactly? For abandoning me like I was trash? Or for forgetting about me for 20 years? My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat and said, almost in a whisper, we know we made mistakes, Liam. We do not expect you to forgive us right now, just to listen to us. I sighed reluctantly, giving them a sign to continue. I wanted to finish as soon as possible. Your brother, Lucas, is now 20 years old, explained my mother, her eyes fixed on her hands clasped on the table. He was always a good student. He was accepted to the University of Texas, here in Austin, and is studying medicine. It is his dream to be a doctor. I felt a chill of resentment. Lucas, the desired son, always had everything I could never even imagine in my childhood fantasies. I could not help but think what my life would have been like if they had wanted to give me half of those opportunities. And what does that have to do with me? I asked coldly, although I already sensed the answer. My father took a deep breath and said with visible discomfort, we lost the house a few months ago. My income is not enough, and your mother has been sick. We have no way to continue paying for Lucas' college. I made a gesture of impatience. The coffee in front of me was cold, like my feelings towards them. So what do you want? Money, I asked ironically. Seriously? After abandoning me, you are looking for me to ask me to finance my brother's life? My mother raised her head, surprised by my reaction, as if she expected me to accept easily. Liam, we know it is unfair to ask this of you, but Lucas is not to blame. He wants to meet you too. He always knew he had an older brother. Does Lucas want to meet me? Or does he need the money for college? I interrupted curtly. They both looked at each other, clearly disoriented by my frankness. He does not know we are asking you this, said my father. We thought you could help us. We know you have done well. We looked you up on social media. We saw that you have a good job, a good life. You could help him without it affecting you too much. That phrase awakened something dark inside me. They were looking at me like a bank account, an opportunity to solve their problems with minimal emotional effort. You do not have the right to decide what affects me and what does not. I replied quietly, containing my rage. My life stopped mattering to you 20 years ago. What makes you think I have an obligation to fix your mistakes now? My mother lowered her gaze, ashamed. My father tried to speak, but I stopped him with a firm gesture. I want you to answer something first, I demanded. Why me? Why do not you go to your friends, family, or anyone else who actually matters to you? There was a heavy silence before my father admitted uncomfortably. No one wants to help us. They turned their backs on us after the bankruptcy. You are our last resort. Hearing those words hurt more than I was willing to admit. 20 years of abandonment, and they were not even looking for me out of remorse, but out of desperation. I closed my eyes for a moment, controlling my emotions. They abandoned me because Lucas was born. They chose one child over the other. Now they expect me to finance his life, while I grew up alone, in an orphanage, with no one's help. My voice began to rise, attracting curious glances from nearby tables. Liam, please, stay calm, my mother whispered uncomfortably. Calm? I repeated incredulously. Are you seriously asking me for calm? You have not even sincerely apologized. You came here to demand money from me to maintain the privileges of the son you did decide to love. I stood up abruptly, dropping a bill on the table. My parents looked up, surprised, clearly not knowing what to say. I am not going to pay for Lucas' college, I said finally. If you want to regain an ounce of dignity, tell him the truth. Tell him that you abandoned his older brother because you could not support both of us. Tell him that now you want that brother, whom he has never met, to finance his dreams, because you failed as parents. They looked at me without answering, stunned, ashamed. But do not look for me again. I already survived without you. I am sure Lucas will too. Without waiting for an answer, I walked towards the exit. My body was shaking, my mind burning with confusion. Leaving the cafe, I inhaled the fresh air deeply. For the first time in many years, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I left the cafe with my heart pounding in my ears and my fists clenched. My emotions were a whirlwind: rage, sadness, disbelief. I got into the car, slammed the door shut, and sat there motionless, staring at the steering wheel as I tried to process what had just happened. For years, I dreamed of the day my parents would come looking for me again. Not because I missed them, but because I wanted to see them beg me. I wanted to see remorse on their faces, hear a sincere apology, maybe even a tear shed for the son they discarded like a piece of old furniture. But no, the only thing I saw in their eyes was desperation. They did not want me, they wanted my money. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger that was still boiling in my chest. I looked at my phone, hesitating whether to call someone. John and Mary, my real parents, the ones who saved me when no one else did. But I did not want to worry them with this. I knew that if I told them, Mary would insist that I forgive them. That resentment would only hurt me. And although she was partly right, I could not simply erase 20 years of abandonment with a conversation in a cafe. I started the engine and drove aimlessly, letting the city pass by like a blur through the windows. I could not go home. Not yet. I needed to clear my head, to give my mind space to find clarity. After a while, I stopped at a park. I got out of the car and walked without a definite destination, letting the fresh air help me calm down. I sat on a bench and watched the families around, parents playing with their children, mothers hugging their little ones. That was the childhood I never had. Then my phone rang. I looked at the screen, and to my surprise, it was an unknown number. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but something inside me made me answer. Hello. There was a brief silence before a male voice spoke on the other end. Liam, it is Lucas. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I was not prepared for this. How did you get my number? Mom gave it to me, he replied, his voice sounding shy, nervous. I did not know that. I did not know my brother. I had no idea who he was. Let me guess, I said coldly. They told you I am the missing brother who magically has money to pay for your college. Lucas took a few seconds to answer. No. Well, yes, they mentioned something about that, he admitted. But I am not calling you for that. I wanted to talk to you. To meet you. That comment caught me off guard. Was he being honest? Or was this just another one of my parents' ploys to manipulate me? And why would you want to meet me now? There was a sigh on the other end of the line. Because I spent 20 years knowing I had a brother no one talked about. Because I grew up in a house where there was a void, an absence that no one wanted to tell me the truth about. His words made me frown. A void, an absence. That did not make sense. He was the wanted child, the perfect son. I was the one who was in the way. Lucas, do not play games with me. I do not know what our parents told you, but I know you did not spend your childhood missing me. I do not know you, Liam, he said firmly. I cannot say that I missed you because I did not even know what you were like. But I did notice the uncomfortable glances when I asked questions, the silences when I mentioned that I must have an older brother. I always knew something did not add up. I remained silent. This was not what I expected. I do not want you to pay for my college, he continued. I just want to understand why you disappeared. That comment made me let out a bitter laugh. I disappeared because they abandoned me, Lucas. Because our parents left me in an orphanage and never looked back. Because they made me feel like I was worthless. Lucas did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice sounded tenser. No, I did not know that. Of course not. Because they did not want you to know. Because they preferred to tell you a version where they were not the villains of this story. The silence on the other end of the line confirmed something for me. Lucas really did not know the truth. If you want to meet me, I said after a few seconds, you will do so with the truth on the table. I am not interested in a fake relationship based on lies. I want to hear everything, he replied, with a determination I did not expect. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes for a moment. I was not sure if I could trust him, but for the first time in my life, I had the opportunity to decide for myself. The next day arrived faster than I expected. I did not know if I was nervous, angry, or simply exhausted. I spent the night thinking about what I would say to Lucas. Could I trust him, or was this just another manipulation by my parents to try to soften me up? We met at a different cafe, far from my parents' house. I did not want to go back to that toxic environment. When I arrived, Lucas was already there, sitting at a table with a coffee in hand. He looked uncomfortable, restless, as if he did not know exactly how to start the conversation. I sat across from him without saying anything at first. I observed him. He had a familiar air, the same eyes as my mother, but there was something in his expression, something genuine. He was not like them. Thank you for coming, he said, breaking the silence. I gave him a small nod, without softening my gaze. You said you wanted to meet me. Fine. But if we are going to talk, I want the truth. What did they tell you about me? Lucas fidgeted with his cup before answering. Not much. I grew up knowing I had a brother, but every time I asked, Mom and Dad avoided the subject. They told me that things were difficult when I was born, that you went away with some distant relatives because they could not support both of us. I laughed incredulously. Distant relatives? They abandoned me in an orphanage, Lucas. They never came looking for me again. His face tensed. I found out yesterday. When you reappeared in our lives, I finally confronted them, and they admitted that they left you there. But they said it as if it had been a logical decision, as if they had no other choice. I crossed my arms. And what do you think? Lucas took a while to answer, but when he did, his voice sounded firmer than I expected. I think it was cruel, that there is no excuse. For the first time, I felt he was speaking sincerely. He did not seem like a puppet of our parents. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. I did not know what to do with this. For years, I had imagined Lucas as a rival, someone who had taken my place without thinking about the consequences. But seeing him now, he seemed more like a victim of their manipulation as much as I had been. I do not hate you, Lucas, I said finally. But understand me, I cannot pretend that we are brothers. He nodded slowly. I understand. I do not expect you to forget what happened. I just want to know the real version of the story. I took a deep breath. The time had come. When I was 7 years old, Mom took me in the car without telling me where we were going. She left me at the door of the orphanage and left without saying goodbye. For years, I waited for them to come back, but they never did. Lucas listened to me silently as I recounted everything. The cold nights in the orphanage, the times I went without dinner because there was not enough food, the loneliness of watching other children get adopted while I remained there, invisible. I told him how, when I was 10, a couple finally adopted me, John and Mary, who gave me the love our parents never gave me. How I worked to earn a living. How I learned to stand on my own 2 feet without expecting anything from anyone. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, clearly affected. No, I had no idea. No, you did not. And now that you do, tell me, do you still think they deserve my help? Lucas remained silent. You could tell he was struggling with himself. I do not know what to say, he murmured finally. I looked at him intently. You do not have to say anything. But if you ever thought our parents were good people, I hope you now understand that they are not. Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I know they are not perfect, but they are our parents, Liam. My jaw tensed. They are not your parents. I do not owe them anything. There was another long silence between us. Finally, Lucas sighed. If you decide not to help them, I will understand. I raised an eyebrow. Were you expecting me to? Lucas shook his head. No, I just wanted to meet you. To know who you really are, not the story they told me. I watched him for a moment. For the first time, I believed his words. Okay, but do not expect this to make us a family. Lucas gave a sad smile. No, but at least maybe we can talk once in a while. After my meeting with Lucas, I spent several days processing everything. I felt strange, as if I had opened a door to a past I had buried long ago. What disturbed me most was not the anger I still felt for my parents, but the confusion about Lucas. It was not his fault. He had not abandoned me, but at the same time, his existence had been the reason why they discarded me. I tried to continue with my life as if nothing had happened, focusing on my work, my business, John and Mary. But an uncomfortable feeling haunted me, as if something was about to happen. And I was not wrong. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents in the office of one of my restaurants, my phone rang. It was my mother. I ignored it. It rang again, and again, and again. Annoyed, I finally answered. What do you want? Liam. How dare you fill Lucas' head with lies, she snapped, her tone full of fury. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a surge of satisfaction. So she had finally found out. They are not lies, Mom, I said coldly. I told him the truth, the one you hid from him his entire life. You made us look like monsters, she shouted. You did not need my help for that, I retorted. You do it perfectly well on your own. There was a tense silence. I could hear her agitated breathing on the other end of the line. Your brother is devastated, she continued, her voice now more controlled, as if she was trying to manipulate me. You have filled his heart with hate. I rolled my eyes. I did not fill him with hate, Mom. I just opened his eyes. Or did you expect him to believe your story forever? She did not answer immediately. Then her tone changed, becoming softer. almost pleading. Look, Liam, we made mistakes, we know. But we are family, and in difficult times, family supports each other. I laughed, unable to contain myself. Family, you have no idea what that word means. Do not you think we deserve a second chance? She tried again. I gritted my teeth, my patience wearing thin. No, because you never gave me 1 inch. The silence stretched, as if she was looking for a way to turn the conversation in her favor. So, you really will not help us. There it was, the real reason for the call. I stood up from my chair, looking out the window of my office. The city kept moving, the world continued to turn, and I was no longer a helpless child dependent on them. No, I answered firmly. And I will tell you something else. Do not call me again. Liam, you cannot do this, she insisted, her tone desperate again. We are your blood. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. No, you are just people who brought me into the world. Nothing more. And I hung up. I dropped the phone on the desk and exhaled slowly. It was over. I thought that with that call everything was over, that I had finally closed that chapter of my life. But I was wrong. 2 days later, while checking the inventory of one of my restaurants, I received a notification of a message on social media. It was from a profile I did not know, but the content of the message made my stomach sink. You are selfish. Your parents gave everything for you, and now you are leaving them to die in misery. You have no heart. I frowned. Before I could process it, more messages arrived, dozens of them. Some called me ungrateful, others insinuated that I had betrayed my family. My parents were manipulating the story. I opened Facebook and confirmed it. My mother had made a public post. It is difficult, as a mother, to accept that one of your children denies you in your time of greatest need. We raised Liam with love. We fed him. We clothed him. We made sacrifices for him. But now that we need help, he has turned his back on us. We do not want money. We just want him to remember that he will always have a family. It was a trap. The post had hundreds of comments from people supporting them, calling me ungrateful, saying how could I abandon my poor parents when they had given me life. Worst of all, they had also mentioned Lucas, insinuating that I was depriving him of an education out of spite. That was their play. They had not managed to manipulate me privately, so they were using social pressure to try to shame me and make me give in. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. They really had no limits. My phone rang. It was Lucas. Did you see what they did? He asked as soon as I answered. Yes, they are damn manipulators. Lucas sighed. I did not know they were going to do this. I told them I did not want your money, that it was not fair. But they did what they always do. Manipulate, twist the story in their favor. Lucas was silent for a moment. I want you to know that I have nothing to do with this. I rubbed my face in frustration. I could not hate him. It was not his fault that he had been raised by them. I know, Lucas. But understand something. This, for me, is the last straw. What are you going to do? Something they do not expect. What? I am going to tell my story. That same night, I sat in front of my computer and wrote a post. Not one full of hate or resentment, but simply the truth. 20 years ago, my parents abandoned me in an orphanage because they did not want to raise both of us. They never looked for me. They never tried to get me back. I grew up believing I was worthless until an adoptive family taught me what love really means. Now, after 2 decades of silence, they have contacted me, not to ask for forgiveness, but to ask for money. I did not fall for their manipulation, so they have decided to use social pressure to try to force me to help them. But I want to make something clear. I do not owe them anything. I am not the villain for refusing to help those who never helped me, and I will not give in to their emotional blackmail. I posted it on all my social media, and I waited. At first, I only received a few responses from close friends supporting me. But within hours, the post exploded. It was shared hundreds of times. People began to ask questions. How can parents abandon a child and then demand their help? 20 years, this is pure manipulation. Do not fall for their game. If they had really loved you, they would have tried to contact you before, not just when they needed money. Little by little, the narrative began to change. The people who initially attacked me began to question my parents' story. The weight of truth was stronger than their lies. I watched my phone blink with my mother's name on the screen. I knew it would not be an apology call. Not after what I had done. I sighed, letting it ring a few more times before finally answering. What do you want now? I asked, not bothering to hide my cold tone. There was a tense silence on the other end before my mother let out a heavy sigh. How could you do this? Her voice sounded tired, but there was still a tone of resentment in it. You humiliated us in public. I let out a dry laugh. Are you really saying that after you tried to manipulate everyone into seeing me as the villain? We had no choice, she replied quickly. We just wanted you to understand. No, you did not want me to understand anything, I interrupted. You wanted me to give in. You wanted me to feel guilty. But you made a mistake, Mom. I am not the helpless child you abandoned. She was silent. Lucas is upset with me, she murmured after a moment. He says we should never have hidden the truth from him. I ran a hand over my face. I did not want Lucas to suffer because of this, but I could not protect him from the truth either. He deserved to know. Maybe now he will understand who you really are. My mother exhaled in frustration. Liam, I know you will not forgive us. No, I will not. Her voice cracked. For the first time, I noticed a hint of something that sounded like remorse. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had done things differently. It hurt me more than I expected to hear that, but it was not enough. Nothing would compensate for what they did. It does not matter, Mom. Why you did not do it, it is too late now. Another long silence. We will not bother you again, she whispered at the end. I promise. I wanted to believe her, but I knew that my parents' promises had never been worth anything. Fine, I said simply, and hung up. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the phone in my hand. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel relief. Just a strange emptiness. I had not defeated them. There was no trophy for beating parents who never loved their son. But what I did have was something more valuable, freedom. I would never again have to wonder why I was not enough for them. I would never again have to wait for them to come back. I would never again have to justify their abandonment. I picked up my phone and called a number that did matter to me. Mom. Mary's voice sounded soft, warm. I smiled for the first time in days. I just wanted to tell you that I love you, Mom. There was a brief silence, and then her laugh. I love you too, son.